All right, what's going on, everybody? Cue up the George Costanza. We're back, baby. Celtics are back. We got the stretch run coming up, tipping off tonight against the Chicago Bulls. It's myself, it's Adam Taylor. We are here to get you set for the quote unquote second half of the season. So come join us, bring a friend, start filling the chat, and let's lock in. What up, what up, what up? Welcome into another edition of Green with Envy. As always, it's your boy Will Weir checking in. How you doing? How you living? Joining me today, my podcasting cousin from across the pond, the lead writer. Let me say that again, the lead writer for Celtics blog. And of course, you know, he is the leader of the Taylor gang. It's the one and only Adam Taylor. What's poppin', Adam? Basketball's back, baby.
Yo, what's popping, man? It feels like I did a podcast with you a few hours ago. Oh, wait, we did.
May have been a thing. That may have been a thing.
God damn, we're back again. I'm good, man. I'm good. Basketball's been, it's been about a week now without a game. I feel like it's been about a year. I don't know how I'm going to handle the off season because this week has been tough in terms of just getting by. We've already got questions coming in on the chat. I know we need to plug some stuff before we get started.
We're going to get to these questions in the chat here, man. But you're right, though, when it comes to this time off. It's funny because I think leading up to the All-Star break, we were like, oh, man, we need a break. And now it's like, man, where's basketball been within our life? We're walking through the desert here looking for a mirage because that's basically what the All-Star game is. It's a mirage. It's not real basketball. It's a mirage. No. It's not real. But tonight, it gets real. So I'm so excited to be back in the swing of things. And so, as you said, a couple of housekeeping things here real quick, and I see our guy CJ's already got a question in the chat. As those of you that are kind of coming in right now, start filling that chat up. We have a few things that we'll talk about, but we really want to kind of get to some questions that everybody has for the second half of the season. Once again, air quotes here, second half of the season, about 28 games left here for the home stretch. But today, if you're locked in with us, number one, we appreciate you. Number two, we're going to be here every single week, Thursday, 5 p.m. Eastern, 4 p.m. Central. We're going to have a live stream for you guys from now all the way through the end of the season and into the playoffs. Most of the times you'll get the full three-man weave. Today it's just me and Adam holding it down. Our guy Greg will be back next week. But we're going to be here every single week, so lock this in to your calendars. Go to your iCalendars. Go to your Google Calendars. 5 p.m. Eastern, 4 p.m. Central. Come kick it with us here on Green with Envy. We're going to be digging into new topics each week, and we want to make sure that we get the chat popping and get to all of your questions. But, with that said, Adam, tonight is the night where Celtics get back. They're playing the Chicago Bulls tonight before they get into a really interesting stretch of games. But, we're going to get to CJ's question. Actually, let's start with CJ's question here. Let's go directly to the chat and get this popping here. We got a question from CJ here. Who are you looking for the most growth out of the bench for the rest of the season? Adam, this is a pretty well-timed question, especially where we're learning for tonight's game. It's a full go. It's a full send. Jaden Springer's active. Xavier Tillman, X, is going to be in the building tonight, is going to be ready to go. So I think this is a great question here. Adam, why don't you go ahead and take this first?
Yeah, so I think for me, it's going to be not so much growth, but more as like showing us what you can do, defining your role within the rotation. That's going to be X. I wanted to come in there with X going to give it to your mentality, that dog mentality. So for me, it's more about this is a great game.
Who are you talking about?
X. There we go. Okay, so yeah, boy. So I think for me, that's going to be a bigger growth in terms of just growing the team, growing that bench, growing that rotation. This is the best game, in my opinion, to kind of ease X into this early, but also see what he brings, because the matchups don't really favor Luke Cornett. To an extent, they don't really favor Kristaps Porzingis on the interior. But Vooch is big and strong. He can kind of body you around. Drummond can obviously really throw his weight around. Bringing X off the bench and seeing what he can do there, to me, is going to be really valuable in terms of understanding what upside he brings, how he brings a different type of skill set to the rotation. So in terms of bench growth, I'm kind of cheating here, but it's going to be seeing what Tillman can do and how he integrates himself into this team.
I'm with you, man. I'm with you. I'm with you. By the
We
way,
need to keep that.
oh, we will. Believe me, the things you can find when you search DMX sound clips, it's amazing. So that's just for another day here. But I'm with you. Let's stick on the Xavier Tillman train here, because I do think for me that is something that I'm really fascinated about. And like you said, just looking at tonight's game specifically, it's interesting to think of what's that counter to a big guy like Drummond. And Vucevic is also pretty big, but like you think of Drummond, like what's that counter? It's kind of supposed to be Xavier Tillman. Now it's his first game back from a knee injury, some swelling in that. So I don't know. I saw an interview, pregame interview. I think Abby Chin asked him the question. No time restriction. I don't know what it's going to be, but that's also one of my biggest questions down the stretch here is what is Xavier Tillman's role? How does Joe Mazzulla insert him into the rotation? Is it every single night he's in there? Is it matchup dependent? Is, him and Luke splitting time? What does that look like, especially with a fully healthy roster? That's what I really want to see, because I love the fact that now when Horford or Porzingis, who we should be resting up, I would say a relatively significant amount when and if needed down the stretch here, that Tillman is going to be able to kind of raise the level of the floor for that Celtics team when those guys sit. But I think when the team's whole, that's really what I'm looking at, because I think guys like Pritchard, guys like Cornette, and guys like Sam, I'm very confident in what they're bringing night to night. And I kind of, you can tell, from watching them night in and night out when they do or do not have it. And I think Joe has adapted well to that line of trusting and then also making adjustments. So I feel very confident with where that's at. I think throwing Tillman into the mix is where we're going to see the most growth. Coming back to CJ's question here, I think that's the most growth for the team. I don't know about individually because we haven't seen Tillman on the court yet, but as a team, I think the way that Tillman's utilized and how he performs, that's going to really be what makes the difference for this bench, at least from how it looked in the, pre-All-Star break versus what we're going to see post-All-Star break and then have ready to go by the time we get into the postseason. I see we got some more people popping in here, so we appreciate you guys. Those of you just getting in here, drop some questions that you got in the chat here. I'll be honest, there's a question here. Maybe Adam, you can fill me in. We got this one from our guy Henzo. Will we get a second Taylor Rooks interview, Curse? Am I missing? Do you know the Taylor Rooks interview? I don't know if I know this.
I mean, I know the one with Tatum after the Warriors stretch where he declared he had that fractured wrist, but that was after the postseason. I don't know.
Yeah, so we'll have to come back, Henzo, if you can just follow up with that in the chat here, so that we can kind of come back to that, and we're happy to discuss that. But I think Adam and I are a little bit out of the loop here. But Adam, as we look at this stretch run, we just started talking about Xavier Tillman. I think another big piece that we're going to watch, and he's been all over the networks lately, has been Jason Tatum, right? Whether it's the MVP push, which, by the way, this is the stretch to do it, or it's going to be just, is he ready to be the face of the league? Can he be the 1A, whatever? I know you were on a podcast earlier today kind of going through and comparing him to other 1As over the last, 20, 30 years of championship level teams. And so I think specifically over the next month, the Celtics, have a quote unquote easy schedule the rest of the way. And a lot of that is just kind of mixed in on the back end. There's, I think, 2 games against the Wizards, 2 games against the Pistons, 2 games against the Bulls starting tonight. But after we get by this Chicago game tonight, as we're recording this on a Thursday afternoon, I'm just going to read to you real quick this stretch of games, because I think this is going to be where, if Tatum is going to make a leap into the MVP category, and if there is, like, I personally kind of fall into the camp. I don't know that Tatum needs to really prove much to me in the regular season or post. I just think, like, I'm very comfortable with who he is. But if you are a Celtics fan that feels like I need Tatum, especially against high-level competition down the stretch, to show me something, this is going to be a stretch for it. So here's the games coming up for the Celtics after the Chicago game. We've got at New York on ABC, versus Philadelphia on TNT, versus Dallas on ESPN, versus Golden State on ABC, at Cleveland on TNT, at Denver on TNT, at Phoenix on ABC. You got Portland and Utah mixed in, and then Phoenix again on TNT. The reason I say it like that, a lot of national TV exposure. Not that this team is unknown, but the spotlight over these next 10 to 12 games, it's gonna be beaming right now. And if Jason Tatum's gonna make an MVP push, or if you're a Celtics fan that feels like you need another level out of Tatum, this is gonna be a stretch where fans are gonna be, examining that even closer.
So sorry, I was reading Henzo's reply. Now I understand what he means. One of the games I'm really looking out for is that Denver game. I think that a lot was made of the Celtics losing to Denver the way they did in their last game. This is going to be their opportunity to kind of at least even that season series against the reigning champions, against arguably the other best team in the league. I personally have down the Clippers, the Nuggets, and the Celtics as the best three teams, the most logical three contenders right now. But this stretch where where they are on TV consistently on national TV, and
I'd like to be on TV as well. We're available. TNT.
Yeah,
ABC,
I mean, reach
ESPN.
out, man.
If you guys need us, if you want to do a side cast, we're here. Let us know. We don't play back before. Let us know. We'll hop in.
I'm just letting everybody know too. My hair don't always look like this, but I had a shower.
Not always the accurate representation of the beauty of the 3-man weave.
I can go and get my beard trimmed and lined up real quick if I know I'm going on TV, just to put that out there. But I think these national games are going to give the Celtics a real feel to kind of get their juices flowing going into the postseason, where the media spotlight starts to brighten, where everyone starts to put a little bit more pressure on the performances. There's a lot more scrutiny. This is a good kind of reminder of what that's going to be like, especially in my opinion, when you've got a team that they're all experienced, but some new faces, and everybody's, they're all used to each other now. But this is going to be a really good way of kind of testing their unity when the media's questioning stuff if there's a bad game. And there are going to be some bad games. There'll be some losses where we're not happy. Personally, I'd like them to beat Golden State. I'd like them to beat Denver. I'd like them to beat Cleveland. From there, whatever happens from there, I'm fine. But the only reason those three are kind of the ones I have circled, as I said, Denver, you need to even that season series. Golden State, I just think that there's an unspoken kind of rivalry between these two teams.
It's the ghost of girlfriends past right there.
Yeah,
right?
dude. And Golden State are kind of on this little run at the moment since they moved Draymond to the 5, where they look like they could be a problem. I want the Celtics to go in there and really just kind of deflate them, pop that balloon, pop that bubble. And then Cleveland, because so many people feel like Cleveland are a sleeper in the East. I think those three teams are going to be some of the biggest tests in terms of the expectations on you, the media spotlight, the discussion surrounding those games.
Yeah, man. And we'll come back to Cleveland here in just a second. I want to get to our guy Phil's got a question here in the chat that I want to get to. Phil's question is, do you think the Celtics have enough wing depth, especially with the playoffs coming up? I'll let you take that first here, Adam.
Yeah, I mean, you can always use more wing depth. If we want to rank wings, what you've got Jaylen Brown, Jason Tatum, Sam Hauser. You can. Who else have you really got? Because you've got.
Here's the thing.
You can probably slide Springer up if you need to.
Well, that's kind of along the lines where I'm going is, do we not just consider Drew Holiday a wing? I mean, Drew Holiday spends time guarding Joel Embiid. He spends time guarding everybody, basically.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? So this for me, and this is a good question, Phil. And this is, I always think we kind of have to like rethink of this. It's positionless basketball. We always have to kind of rethink of what it means to have wing depth, because this is always my thought process is that, if Peyton Pritchard's in the lineup, Holiday's out there with him. Holiday's more of a wing than he is really a guard at that.
Yeah, that's fair. Right? Yeah.
You know what I mean? And so depending on the lineup structure and who everyone's matching up with, it's almost matchup dependent as like who you're going to call a wing. And like in certain lineups, you might call Jaylen Brown more of a guard than a wing. I mean, I get, it's so I think for me, that's always when I get to, is there enough depth at the wing? I kind of think about it as like you're saying, like there's JT and JB, which are the front line of defense. But then depending on how you start to manipulate what that 5-person personnel is on the court, Drew Holiday is probably really your third or fourth wing. Sam Hauser's in that mix as well. But that's really Holiday's spot because he's going to guard so many different people. So it's not, and I think depth chart when it comes to basketball is just so different than it is for like a sport like baseball or football or something where it's just so much more strictly defined. Here, especially just the way basketball is played now, it's just constantly shifting depending on who you have on the actual court.
Yeah, I think that you can also kind of, and I agree completely. So in my head as well, you could probably slide Tillman down. You could slide Springer up. There's just so, as you said, there's so much versatility, so many combinations that you can run with that kind of bench unit and that wing depth. Brissett can play a couple of different positions on that wing. I'm quite comfortable there. I know that a lot of people are very high on potentially adding Otto Porter Jr. I know there's a report today. He's not with Utah. He's headed back home to Charlotte. He's healthy. He's ready to play. Considering a contract buyout, he would probably, I don't know what happened there. He would probably be the guy that everybody wants to pick up on the buyout market. That makes sense. Another 3-and-D guy, give you some extra depth. I think, as I said earlier on the podcast earlier, I kind of lean more towards guard depth, but it depends how comfortable you are with Springer. Like, do you feel comfortable with him as a ball handler in an emergency situation? If you do, then that situation's fine. You go and pick up an Otto Porter Jr. or somebody along those type of lines. So I'm not too concerned with wing depth. In fact, I'm not concerned with depth across the board, to be quite honest with you, depending on if you view Springer as a ball handler.
And real quick, little self promo. If you guys are curious on our deeper thoughts about a guy like Otto Porter Jr., go hit the YouTube page. I think it's on the podcast feed as well, but definitely go hit the YouTube page. We have that was the second candidate that we did in our buyout series was Otto Porter Jr. So go check out our thoughts on that. That was myself and Adam on that as well. Let's see, we got another question up here that I want to go back to. See, this one's also from our guy CJ here again. Do you think Mazzulla keeps experimenting new things like he was before the break? And this was on my own list of questions I kind of wanted to make our way through. So this is a great question here, Adam. What do you think about what Mazzulla's been experimenting with? And then what do you think he either continues to do, or what do you want to see? You take that where you want.
Yeah, what we usually see from coaches in the NBA, I'm just going to leave that back up because otherwise I'll forget. What we usually see is you experiment up until the All-Star break. You try different schemes, you try different systems. I think that for the majority, we're going to see a very set offensive system now. We know what plays they've run. We know what frequency they've run them at, depending on what teams, or at least other teams know that. I'm not really sure on play frequency by matchup. I don't even think there's a way to track that, to be honest. I think they still experiment with the 2-1-2 spy. I think that zone's here to stay. They really want to build on that. They even had the stay ready group running that in the last game out. So that would be part of the experimenting that I think stays throughout the remainder of the season heading into the postseason. Whether we see it in the playoffs or not's a completely different story. Outside of that defense, outside of that zone, I don't think we really see much experimentation. We might go back to some of the stuff we saw earlier in the season. I know that earlier in the year, they were running a lot of empty corner pick and rolls, empty corner handoffs, getting some two-man games with KP as like the primary initiator, and then building off that. They've moved away from that during most like the middle of the season. They might go back to that. I think what you do at the start is you try out these different schemes, you figure out what works, and then you start building your kind of overall playoff game plan around that. And now this is the time to cement those into memory and get those reps. So outside of the 2-1-2, I'd expect the rotation to start shrinking and the playbook to start being solidified.
Yeah, I mean, I think definitely with the 2-1-2, I'm gonna be honest. I would expect actually Mazzulla, especially where the Celtics have a 6-game lead right now on the 1 seed.
Yeah.
And I don't want people to go nuts, because I think there's going to be a game or two in these last 28, 29 games, whatever it is, where Mazzulla probably sticks with it almost to a fault, because it's like, this is kind of like, we need to make or break ourselves in this, right? Like, this is the time to do it. And when you have a 6-game lead, hopefully that one game shouldn't be the difference. It'd be a different story if, the Bucks were on our ass and they were 2 games back. You got a 6-game cushion right now, where I think that they're really going to like dig into like, what is this going to look like if we need it in a really important playoff moment? And I think one thing, and correct me if I'm wrong on this, Adam, I feel like right before the break, and I'm blanking on what game it was, but it felt like, and usually Drew Holiday, as we've called him, is the defensive coordinator in the middle, calling out all the shots. It felt like at some point in one of the last couple of games before the break, they experimented a little bit with Tatum in that spot as well.
Yes,
kind of like,
they did.
And so that was something that kind of went overlooked just because the break happened, so we didn't really have a chance to talk about it. But that caught my eye, as that's another wrinkle where Holiday is so great because it's trying to, in ways, like prevent the snaking of that screen so they can't get in the middle. You don't have to worry as much about a guy like Kristaps playing drop or Lucas in there, whatever the combination might be. But Tatum in that middle was a little interesting. I'm curious to get your thoughts on that. We haven't had a chance. You and I haven't talked about that at all, but that was something that I did catch for a few stretches in one of those games right before the break.
Yeah, I think that when you look at it from a defensive standpoint, Tatum's bigger, he's longer, he can see over the defense a little bit easier. If you want somebody being vocal and calling out movement, calling out screening actions, having somebody at Tatum's size in that middle is going to be more beneficial. Also, because he's longer and he's more athletic, he can stunt and get to ball handlers a bit quicker in terms of pressuring the dribble, trying to force a pickup. So having him play that spy role makes sense. I'd still prefer Drew there just because I feel like Drew's a little bit stronger in terms of his leg strength and his core strength, so he can, when he does
I also think Drew's mind is underrated, because Drew thinks,
he thinks the game.
I mean, this is why I've used this as an NFL comparison before, Adam. But there was a safety for the Ravens named Ed Reed, who just like, he was always one play ahead. And there's a bunch of clips where people have talked about, he's a Hall of Famer, but people have talked about where he kind of would call his own number at times without telling anybody, because he was just very perceptive, intuitive is probably a good word for it, right? And so I think that's something that and I'm not saying JT doesn't have that, but Tatum already has a lot on his shoulders when it comes to this team. And for Holiday, that's kind of been the role that he's slid into. And we've seen many clips of Missoula saying, it's on you, Drew. Drew, you're the captain out there. Like, if you want to audible, like, that's on you. Just, you got to be vocal. Yeah. You got to make that call. And so I don't know that I necessarily want to put a ton more on Tatum's shoulder, but I'd like the idea of, once again, back to the question here, experimenting, because there might be a team that's like, oh, we've, I don't want to say, maybe they haven't solved it, but they've had their own counter to, you got Holiday in the middle. Oh, what if we put 6'10" with length in the middle of that now? How does that change what your counter was to our counter? And so it's, again, that chess match that Missoula, to his credit, man, I love that he's growing as a coach, right? And seeing these type of experimentations is something that I think is a major plus for him. The one other experimentation that I think we might see, and this kind of goes back to our conversation we were having about Xavier Tillman, is that, there could be a, just rotation wise, where does he fit in? Yeah. So there may be some experimentation rotation wise as well, would be something to look for. I think we have another 10. Please drop some questions in the chat. We're going to be happy to try to get to all of them today. We know long-term we do have a super chat function. So if you want to make sure that your question absolutely gets answered before we log off here, go ahead, use that super chat. We appreciate any support that you guys give us. Means a lot for us to be able to do this more and more often. This one here, shout out to the Southsiders. I don't know if that's actually how he wanted me to say it, but that's how I'm gonna say it. Southsiders.
Do the bar.
Hold on. Let's do that. Run that back one more time. Southsiders. There we go. Xavier Tillman comes run from the side. All right. So they got for us today. Their question is: will they, meaning the Celtics, rest the Jays before the playoffs or build their minutes?
Man, that's tough. I don't expect them to play more minutes, do you? Like, I think that you don't want to put, part of the beauty of this team is there's so much depth and so much versatility that you can manage their minutes. It's not like they're playing bad. It's not like they're out of rhythm. Maybe you play a little bit higher minutes coming out of the All-Star break just to get everybody kind of back to where they were in terms of what level they're at, try and help them take that next step in that execution. But overall, I think that their minutes have been quite consistent all year. I don't envision that changing, because I don't envision that changing in the postseason. They've stuck to quite a 8-man, 9-man rotation during the regular
pretty much
season.
Every night, basically.
Yeah.
Some of the parts change every now and then, but I'm of the belief that I think really what this stretch run is going to be designed for is when you get those matchups that aren't on a back-to-back, and you have, you're going up against that stretch that I just listed out here. And then if you get even further into the season, there's some late season matchups against Milwaukee and New York. Those are so late that I don't even know if those are going to be, we'll have to see. Health will dictate a lot there, but in the next month or so, I would actually expect, I would not be surprised. I'm not saying expect, I wouldn't be surprised if their minutes grow a little bit, because I could see Joe using this next month as like, let's get our game prep in, because our playoff game prep in, because right after you hit that stretch that I rolled out, you're going to get a lot of Washington, a lot of Detroit, a lot of Chicago, a lot of Atlanta, a lot of Charlotte, a lot of all those teams, basically times 2 is what you're going to get once you get past about a month from now, March 20th or so. So I think in the next month, and then that also gives you time to kind of, still be in your flow, but start to be like, all right, Jalen, you're going to take a night off. JT, you're going to take a night off, even if they're healthy, just to make sure that they're in the right shape come playoff time. So I think over the next month, my guess would be that they might actually go a little bit over what their probably current averages, because there's so many,
and then we're going to level it back out,
and then kind of level back down. And probably you'll see over that last week and a half, 2 weeks, I'm sure you'll see several DNPs, quote unquote sore, whatever they need to do to avoid getting fined. I think you'll probably see that. Adam, I want to go back to something that you brought up earlier, and that was the Cleveland Cavaliers. The Cavaliers are in second place in the East right now. They are on a pretty incredible run. I think they're like either 18-2 or 17-3 in their last 20, something crazy like that. And the fact that they're still 6 games back of the Celtics, for any worries that we want to have, like, let's just appreciate that a team went, 17-3, 18-2 in a 20 game stretch. And all that did was get them 6 games behind us in the running. So a question that I was thinking about, as we were getting ready to do this here, it feels, and tell me if you agree with this, it feels pretty far-fetched to see there being a world in which right now the Celtics don't leave this regular season as the number 1 seed. Do you agree with that?
Yeah, I don't even imagine that happening. It could, but I don't imagine it happening.
Yeah, it feels pretty
catastrophic would be the words that I'd use. It takes something catastrophic.
Yeah, this would be an all-time collapse if the Celtics don't get out of at least the regular season, with that 1 seed. So I guess my question for you is, when you look at the teams that are below the Celtics, what are you looking for? Because like I said, it's going to be too hard for them seemingly to close that gap of 6-game lead, 8-game lead over the Bucks. Like, that's going to be a really hard gap in 28 games to go ahead and close. So what are you going to be looking for from those teams as far as trying to size them up as playoff opponents?
Yeah, but in terms of like, what am I looking for as like a threat, or what am I looking for as like?
I mean, take that whichever way you will, because I feel like, with the Celtics, there's only going to be so much that we can really dig into about this team themselves. We feel pretty comfortable. We've already gone through what are some of the things that we'll look for. How does Tillman fit in? What type of defenses does Joe experiment with? But from a standings watch and from a looking at that long-term play, like, a team's going to have to get even hotter than what the Cavs just were to really put a scare into the Celtics not getting that 1 seed. So really, we're going to be watching that 6 through 8 race, kind of see what happens there, to see what that first round matchup is. And then we're going to be watching these teams to be like, the Knicks a month ago, before they had a bunch of injuries, like, they started to look like, I got to keep an eye on that team. I got to really see where this team might pose a threat to us. So I guess, which teams are you looking at, or what players do you think are the ones that are going to stick out to you that outside of the Celtics you're going to be keeping an eye on down the stretch here?
Okay, so I'm going to do this a little bit differently. I'm going to start with New York. I'm going to work my way down to the Hawks. I'm going to give you down to the I'll go down as far as the Hornets in 13th and just give you one thing from each team that I'm watching out for. So New York, it's how long until they get healthy? How long until Randall's back? How long until Anunoby's back? And how long until they're back up to speed? I think that's going to be a huge difference maker in their ability to climb above 4th, or at least retain 4th in the East. I think that's going to be there. Philadelphia, obviously, it's going to be Embiid. Is he out for the season? If he is, how are you going to cope? Obviously, are you throwing in the towel? If he is back, then what version of Embiid are you going to get? Indiana, I want to see how that Siakam and Halliburton 2-man game carries on evolving. It was quite young. Obviously, Halliburton was out during Siakam's first few games, and then Siakam was out afterwards. So seeing if that evolves and how that works is going to be interesting. Miami, can they figure it out? They've been not bad, but not great all season. Terry Rozier is going to be out for a while with that injury sustained against Boston. Can he come back? How much of a difference would he make? Because he was struggling in his first few games. Orlando, do we see another leap from Banchero? Is Anthony Black playing well? Do we see a leap from France? What can they do to go from 8 to 6 and avoid that playing? Do you know what I mean? And what needs to happen around them? Chicago, again, it's going to be something along the lines of, can they even sustain their run that got them, because they were being bad, they went good, they moved into the plane. Can they sustain that? Who's their star? Who is it? Ayo Dosunmu again? Is he the guy we're leaning towards again? He's had a good season. Well, he's had a bit of a bounce back. Kobe White. Yeah. Can Kobe White sustain? Can he improve even more? But that's a question for me. How's their defense going to look against better teams as we start closing in? Defense was a question for them, especially with Vooch. Atlanta, there's a lot of talk about Trae Young right now potentially being a trade chip. It's going to be a choice between Trae and Jante. Are we going to start seeing some individual play? Do you know what I'm saying? Both guys trying to prove that they're the lead guard of the future. Again, Atlanta's defense has been an issue for years. I think when you're trying to build around Clay, you need that defensive wings. Atlanta don't really have that. They've got is it Jamie Johnson? Am I remembering his name correctly?
Oh God, why am I Jalen Johnson?
Jalen Johnson, there we go. Sorry, I knew it was James.
Dude, you had me tripping. I for some reason, after you said that, I couldn't get Stanley Johnson out of my head, and I was like,
dude,
it's definitely not.
To me.
was like, it is definitely not Stanley Johnson. You know the Jay that he's talking about. It's Jalen Johnson, who's been really nice for the Hawks this year.
I do want to point out that he's probably one of their better candidates to actually take another step during the season and make a run. Brooklyn, they've just traded away. They moved on from Dinwiddie. Did they move on from DFS?
Dinwiddie? No. They kept DFS. They traded Royce O'Neal.
That was the one. They traded Royce.
But they also just fired their coach 2 days ago. So
there we go.
Not a good state of affairs in Brooklyn.
Do you know what? Brooklyn are tanking. Toronto, again, I'm not really comfortable with them, but you've got Scotty, you've got RJ, you've got Quickly. I
think honestly that Brooklyn, Toronto, Charlotte, maybe Brooklyn can get back into this thing, but the weird part about the East is it feels kind of set. Like in a certain respect.
Gave you a reason for every team.
Hey man, you were killing it. The fact that you dove down to the Hornets and Raptors, that's your dedication.
Well, the Charlotte Hornets is just going to be Grant Williams. He's averaging 17 points in 3 games since moving over. Grant Williams is the new Michael Jordan in Charlotte.
Grant's got that home cooking, man. Grant's going to give us some hope that even though we're one of the last podcasts that still believe Grant Williams is a good basketball player, Charlotte's gonna give us a little bit.
It's a red flag at this point. You know that, right? If we was on a dating show, that'd be the red flag. It would give everyone the ick, and that'd be us. Do you watch Love Is Blind?
It was funny you said that right before this. My fiance's in the living room watching it right now. So that's basically her show that she watches while I do, basically
you're
basketball
missing
stuff.
Out, dude.
And then I catch bits and pieces of it here. They're on season 7 already. I feel like that show started last year.
Yeah, you're missing out though, dude, man. I binge watched that shit with the wife. But I'm telling you, but if I was in a pod and someone was like, yo, Grant Williams is a good ball, I'd be like, red flag, I'm done. Let me
That's
move
the
on.
red flag. I'm still into Grant Williams.
But I'm the Grant Williams guy, so I'm the red flag. Do you get what I'm saying? So
you can't quit him, man. You can't quit him. But no, I think you did a great job of just kind of going through each of the teams and what they're looking at. I'm looking at this right now. I can't help but go to this, looking at the play-in and looking at, it's going to be that 7-8 seed is likely where the Celtics first round opponent comes out of. And, we see Philly next week on Tuesday night. Celtics play Philly. And of course that's the Embiid question, but I think they're in this category of Sixers, Pacers, Heat, Magic. That feels like 2 out of those 4 are going to be the play-in teams. And then I feel like it's kind of the Cavs, Bucks, and Knicks that will fight it out for that 2 through 4 and get that first round home court advantage. So when you're looking at the Sixers, you're looking at the Pacers, the Heat, and the Magic. If we're thinking ahead to the first round here with the Celtics, now of course I know Joel Embiid's health will make the difference of, and they're in the Rob Williams situation we were in a couple years ago, right? Where I don't really know. Even when he comes back, Rob was never Rob when he came back, right? Maybe
not that year. That was against Brooklyn. That was the year, right? Yeah, he weren't himself all the way.
Wasn't himself, and by the finals, it was. He kept missing games throughout the entire postseason.
Yeah, they were trying to manage the minutes. It just he wasn't.
He barely played in that Milwaukee series, right?
And then he missed additional time to start the next season because he came back too early and it flared back up. So there's a lesson to be learned there for Philly.
Yeah. So when you look at Philly, Indiana, Miami, Orlando, how do you kind of handicap that right now? They're all within about 2.5 games of each other. Let's just do this. Who do you, if we had to rank them, 1 being the team the Celtics most want to play, 4 being the team the Celtics least want to play in the first round? How do you see that right now, knowing that Joel Embiid is a mystery, but that there's almost a guarantee he's not going to be the Joel Embiid that we know?
So I'll rank it I'm going to do 2. I'm going to rank it for who the Celtics will probably want, and then I'm going to rank it for who I want. So 1 will be Philly. You want to play Philly because their best players either not available or is 10 to 25% of his usual self. So let's walk it through. Number 2, I'm going to go with Orlando. They're good. They play you tough, but they're inexperienced. You can walk through them. Number 3, I'm going to go with Indiana. Again, they're a good team, but they're still inexperienced. There's a lot to learn there. I think that you've still got the advantage on multiple positions. Number 4, it's going to be Miami, as Henzo said, because it's Miami and it just never seems to go well. Now, for me, I want Miami as early as possible. If you're going to have to,
you believe in the smoke. Let's get them out of the way right away.
Yeah, let's get them out of the way right away. Let's send them home. Let's shut up all the fan base. Let's get rid of that that little bit of doubt in the back of our mind. What if we see Miami? No, let's just deal with it in the first round while both teams are fresh. no injuries, no bumps and bruises for a difficult postseason run. Just take care of business, send them home, flex your muscles, give us all some bragging rights on social media, and let's move on. That would be my choice personally. But obviously, most people would rather not see Miami at all. I just think if you're going to have to beat them, you might as well do it in the first round while you're completely healthy.
Not gonna lie, man, I fall into that camp. I'm just, I've been chesty about the Heat in the bubble. Felt chesty about the Heat, the year we went to the finals and it was a Jimmy Butler, what I thought was going in 3-pointer away from the Heat being 3-0 against us in the conference finals, obviously last year. I think we're well equipped to handle it. Like, I think Kristaps Porzingis is the absolute game changer against Miami. Like, I mean, he's the game changer against almost most teams that the Celtics are going to play. He's the difference from all these past iterations versus what we have now. But versus Miami, it completely changes what they can do with their schemes and what, Spoelstra is the best coach in the NBA, in my opinion. And it's still going to limit him if the Celtics have a fully healthy roster. But having said that, and I know you put Philadelphia first, I'm still putting Philadelphia second. I'm putting the Magic still as the team that I would want to play, just because
even without a healthy Embiid.
Well, here's the thing. If Embiid's completely just not there, the answer is Philly. If Embiid's there, and even if he's the diminished version, I'm still probably just going Orlando just for the straight inexperience factor. Like, do I think we're going to sweep them? No. But does a team, I mean, just look at NBA history. It is very rare that a team with the age of the Orlando Magic is going to be able to, get by a team with the stature of the Celtics. So if Embiid's just completely out, the answer is easy, Philly. I'm saying if Embiid's there and even if he's 60, 70%, I would still just, because I think they do have a really good team around. Like, I think the Buddy Hield trade was good. Like, I like Tyrese Maxey a lot. They've got some veterans on that
Lowry,
team. I mean, honestly, we've trashed Tobias Harris on the show a bunch before, but he's having a good season. He does match up relatively well with like what the Celtics have as far as, bunch of different wings being switchable. Batum's been good for them. It's close, but I would probably go Orlando. I'm going to say Philly in the 2 spot. Then I would go Indiana, because I think with Siakam, and then you add in the factor that, Aaron Nesmith, who's having an amazing season, loves to play out of his mind because he's got a chip on his shoulder against the Celtics. So you add that in with what Tyrese Halliburton is, and then Miami is just always going to be last. I'll be honest, man. I like, part of me would love to win a championship and go through the Heat doing it just because it would be that much more satisfying. But at the same time, screw the bullshit. I'm cool with just avoiding Miami Heat. Like, I'm just cool with being done with Miami and never having to see.
Nah, give me the smoke, bro. Give me the smoke. And I will say, like, last season when they played Philly, if I remember correctly, Embiid was banged up towards the end of that series. Dude, we've got a troll in the comments, and it's really starting to frustrate me. Please stop. So just stop. What was I saying? Yeah, Embiid was a bit banged up in the last series in the postseason, if I remember correctly.
But he's always banged. That's if you say Embiid postseason on Google, the next thing is injured. Like, right when you're doing the fill in the blank search, Embiid postseason.
Let me try this. Are you joking, or have you tried this?
I'm just joking, but I'm assuming that is probably if you just type in Embiid postseason, and then
I'll get stats.
Sure, I would say stats will come up probably, but really
stats, record, averages.
They go hand in hand. Embiid
injuries is the 6th one.
Exactly. They go hand in hand. You can't talk about the two of them separately. But yeah, so Adam, looking at the rest of the second half here, we've hit a bunch of the kind of key points. What's something that we haven't touched on that you're thinking about here for the second half?
Sorry, what was that?
I was saying, what else are you thinking about for the second half here that we haven't talked about yet? What else are some of the keys or just some of your thoughts that you're looking ahead here in the second half?
Yeah, I think for me, for the Celtics, my keys are just everybody staying healthy. Obviously, healthiest team is always the wealthiest team in terms of health as well. If you know you're going to be successful, you need your best guys. Another key for me is figuring out your rotations based on matchups. Like, are we going to have Tillman and Cornet kind of, you want skill-based matchups, we're going Cornet. You want physical matchups, we're going Tillman. I think figuring out your matchups and figuring out your rotations based on that are going to be important. I also think finding a way to incorporate more Hauser and Pritchard kind of touches in terms of offensively is going to be decent. We've got a good question here. How do we solve our defensive rebounding problem? Anyone else know? Well, that wasn't an issue to begin the season. The Celtics were one of the better defensive rebounding teams in the league. They were also one of the better second chance teams in the league over the first 25
For a while, we
games
were the top overall rebounding team in the league.
Yeah.
I don't know if that's still the case now, but I'll try to look that up as you're talking.
Have a look. So I don't think it needs fixing. I think it's just recommitting. That issue kind of formed at the end of the season over like the last week and a half, and it was mainly because everybody was tired. They'd kind of taken themselves away on like a little vacation mentally. I think that once they come back, they lock back in. I think that defensive rebounding kind of just picks up anyway because it wasn't an issue for the majority of the season.
Jump in right now. So technically, with number of defensive rebounds, they are number one in the league. So at 36.6 a game, we're not the greatest offensive rebounding team, but I think that's a lot of just based on the style of
and you get back, yeah.
But overall, there and this was a thing that I've been surprised about throughout the year because I thought going into the year that was going to be an area where I could see there be some slippage that this team wouldn't be great at rebounding, and I understand where the comment's coming from because there is it's kind of timing based, right? Where every once in a while you are going to see something that sticks out to you, and you're like, oh man, I think that's a sore spot for this team, but it's a little bit like the Celtics in the clutch where everyone feels like there's this big gap of this team doesn't know how to close. Yet, if you try to back it up with stats, the stats don't back that up. The stats back up that this team is actually pretty good in the fourth quarter,
clutch team
rating in the clutch. Like all of those stats say the opposite of what a lot of people feel. And so that's where I think this comment is kind of coming from. Because, yeah, technically right now they're the number one defensive rebounding team and they're the number one overall rebounding team in the NBA, which like I said, I didn't think was going to be a strong suit of this team coming into the year. But I know the numbers say one thing, and maybe some people visually they say a different thing. But, you know, that's why sometimes they don't always line up one-to-one. You're going to have certain moments that stick out to you in your mind that don't let you, kind of see the full narrative sometimes. And that happens. Not a big deal. It happens.
Yeah, I think I want to put it like this as well in terms of that clutch performance, in terms of fourth quarter offense and defense and execution. A lot of it comes down to the fact that you're not relying on one guy. So it's not as jaw dropping. It's not as highlight worthy. Tatum got 4, Brown got 5, Porzingis went off at 7 points in the fourth. Do you know what I mean? But you're getting a well-rounded production across the board, across everyone. Whereas if you look at Cleveland, everyone's like, man, Cleveland are great in the clutch. I'm not saying they are. I haven't looked at the numbers. I'm just using them as an example. You're like, well, it's not really Cleveland are great in the clutch. They just play through Mitchell consistently, and Mitchell's great in the clutch. So it makes them look like a more clutch team because Boston spread it out a little bit more, and there's more variance in terms of who's having a hot shooting night, who's not. They trust each other. It just doesn't feel like they're a dominant fourth quarter team. Whereas if you watch one guy just take over game after game after game, it's kind of like that false sense of security. Because what happens when that one guy that takes over has an off night, and now you're not that clutch team because you don't have a second or third option to fall back on. Boston have second, third, fourth, fifth. So it's a feeling. It is like it's a false feeling. It's a false start. I think Boston are actually one of the better clutch teams in the league.
Yeah, I mean, I'm looking at it right now, and it's funny because I totally get it because I know there are times where I watch this team and I've been trying to, and this is something that Adam, maybe you're better with some of these statistical websites that I want to track. I think the biggest problem area for this team is if they're up. I don't know exactly what the number is, but it's like
then it's stuck.
I do like that song, but they're up 8-12 with like 3 minutes, 3.5 minutes. That's kind of the trouble area for me because that's when in the regular season, more often than not, when they start to slow down their offense, they don't get into a motion until 8 seconds. They just kind of dribbling out by half court where they have one single action and everyone's kind of set, and that leads to transition baskets for the other team, and that allows them to get back into the game. Those are the ones that I think in the regular season, they sometimes slip into that clutch and the Celtics will eventually pull away. In the playoffs, those are the type of games for me that when I look at the last couple of postseasons that I'm most concerned about, where they had to go, like let's use the Hawks series last year in the first round. I think it was game 5 where they could have closed out the Hawks at home, but then had to go play a game 6 because Trae Young got hot. They slipped it away, right? Because that was the game to me that told me this team did not learn the lessons of what was one of the reasons that prevented them from winning the finals the year before is you can't keep having to win 5 games in a 7-game series, right? You have to close those teams out, whether it's for health, whether it's for preservation, or there's just too much talent. Like, that's what I look at the Knicks. Like, a team like the Knicks, if you have to win 5 games against them instead of 4, like, if you end up giving yourself a coin toss game at the end of a game 7, like, Jalen Brunson's kind of a killer, man. Like, right? Like, I don't want to do that. I don't want to give them game 4 and have that happen. So for me, that's the problem area that I'm trying to keep an eye on in a lot of these games down the stretch here, because I think if the game's actually like within 5 points and it's going back and forth, and it doesn't get to that point where the Celtics can feel comfortable enough to slow it down, I think they're pretty good. And that's where I'm, like I said, now this is where I'm going back to. I'm looking at, the clutch time stats throughout the season right now. Offensively, Celtics are 5th in the league. Defensively, they're 4th in the league. Net rating, they're 2nd in the league. So when you look at the stats don't back up what the eye says. And I think that's because a lot of the issues that we see, for me, probably fall just outside of that. And then those games creep into that clutch area. Celtics find a way to win. But in the postseason, when you're against the best teams, night in, night out, night after night, same team for 2 weeks or whatever, those are the games where you get got. And those are the games that continually, I feel like, have come back and bit the Celtics in the ass. And that's what they can't allow to have happen to them this year, if this is truly going to be the year for Banner 18.
I agree. And the trolls returned. I'm playing. He's actually got a decent point. I think that when you're looking at closing out games in 5th rather than 4th, and like in 5th game rather than the 4th game, I think one of the biggest things to kind of really stand your ground on is defensive execution. And last season, the biggest issue was there wasn't a defensive mindset. And this season, I feel like there is, but at the same time, sometimes I feel like they can get away from that, and they can over focus on leaking out too early. They can over focus on trying to get the ball up the floor and just take early shots. I remember having on the podcast I was on earlier today, we were discussing Boston's tendency to shoot threes in transition before everybody gets up the floor. And the host of the show was saying, like, it's a good strategy because it means that everyone's back in time for transition if you miss. And my pushback was, well, if you scored, there's no transition opportunity in the first place, so you don't need to worry about where you're positioned because you scored. You've got time to come back. And I think that's kind of the mentality issue that Boston has sometimes, is they kind of go away from their defense and just try to run up the score to point to kind of like demoralize guys. And that works with the amount of talent you've got. But what we've seen this year is when that doesn't work, when you are trying to run up the score and shots that aren't falling, that's when you start to lose your kind of pop on the defensive end, and the team really just start to like just land their jab after jab and start chipping away. So I think that's a mentality they need to shift out of, as you were saying, where if you want to win game 4 and avoid game 5, it's all about understanding that we're not trying to just run up the score offensively and let that bleed into our defense. It's keeping that balance. And we've seen them do that for a long stretch of the season, but we've also seen them make some really boneheaded mistakes in the way they've approached attacking out of defensive situations.
And at the end of the day, I mean, this is a little bit, like what was said about Jason Tatum, or Jason Tatum said this. I think you just got to do it. At the end of the day, you just got to go out, and until the Celtics conquer these demons when it matters most, like that, it is going to be what it is. See, we got a little comment here. With KP, we can't afford to have series extended unnecessarily in the postseason. Shout out to our guy Mitchie here. Appreciate the comment, man. 100% agree. And I feel like the last couple of years that was also the case with Al Horford too. And now you have Al Horford and KP. Obviously, Tillman has been brought in to give some extra support to that if and when those scenarios happen. But yeah, I think that's a huge part of it. That's what I always keep going back to for that finals run against the Warriors. Is that because there were there's in the Milwaukee series, games in the Miami series that we didn't close out when we needed. We were already running short. We just talked about Rob Williams' injury. Like, they were gassed. They were gassed at that point. And I think last year we saw that to a degree as well in the Atlanta series. We saw it in the Philly series. Early on in the Miami series, we saw that as well, and put yourself in a 3-0 hole and you got to dig out. And it was just too much of a hill to climb. So, I think that's going to be one of those things that we won't ever really know until it happens. Much like, like Tatum said, you got to eventually, you just got to go do it. You got to go do it, bro. Then we can stop worrying about it. But Adam, I feel like we've been going for about 50 minutes here. Anything else you got here before we put a bow on this and get ready for some actual NBA basketball tonight?
No, dude, At 10:50 here, I'm going to be waking up at 5:30 to watch the game. If you didn't tell, about 10 minutes ago, my brain started to slow down.
We got to wrap this up.
I'm pretty good.
Well, appreciate everybody that's joining us today in the chat. Just quick reminder for those of you still tuned in. Every Thursday, 5 p.m. Eastern, 4 p.m. Central, we're going to be back here on this platform, live on Twitter, live on YouTube. We will be here throughout the rest of the regular season and throughout the playoffs, so make sure that you are rocking with us. Throw a subscribe on that YouTube channel. We have a membership-only page as well, too. Join us in the Discord. Make sure you're following the Celtics Chronicles from Adam if you want to get some additional inside tips outside of just his work with Celtics blog.
In the description, at Celtics Chronicles, you just search it, Celtics Chronicles Substack. If you're watching this back and click on the down in the description, the link will be there. Otherwise, the Celtics Chronicles, just type it into Google, it'll pop up. Hit subscribe, get newsletters sent to your inbox.
That's right. And then post-game coverage, we're going to have a lot of that for you, especially Sunday through Thursday, just about every week. You should see that from myself and Greg. Previews are going to be coming from Adam Taylor starting this weekend leading up to the game against the Knicks. So you need a pregame show, you need a postgame show, you need some content in the middle of the week. Lock in with Green with Envy. We got it all for you guys. Adam, I'm gonna let you get to bed here, man. This has been a fun episode, and I'm super excited for this stretch run right now.
I love the Celtics.
All right, y'all. We love y'all playing you out today. We got Black Sheep Optimist from down here in Austin, Texas. They are our guy, Greg Menakis' band. Let's do it. We will see y'all later. Deuces.
Every time I get this high, I lose my mind. It don't take much no more until I hit the floor. Every time I get this high, it's you I find. It don't take much no more until I'm at your door.
You cut me to my core, baby. What can I say? You got me on the floor, you know I came to play. I know I shouldn't, but you seem to take my pain away. And every time I score, Jason Tatum fade away. I close my eyes and I'm floating your river. I call to see if you open, you know I hope you deliver. Every time you're getting close, I still be sick with the shivers. But there's nothing like that first time. I still remember the first time.